She was humiliated the moment she walked into the interview because of a wrinkled shirt, worn-down shoes, and a faded canvas bag slung over her shoulder. "Must have walked into the wrong building," the receptionist whispered. Who shows up like that to an interview? In the hiring room, they scrutinized every line of her resume, mocked her working-class background, and asked, with a smirk, "Do you really think you're refined enough to work here?" Emily just smiled, answering each question with quiet composure, unaware they were moments away from being outranked by the very woman they dismissed. Even before she stepped through the tall glass doors of Cunningham Langston Real Estate, Emily Brown had felt a faint prickle of apprehension. The building towered over the block, reflective panels glinting in the morning sun. She clutched her canvas bag with one hand, smoothing down her wrinkled blouse with the other. A part of her had almost turned around to go home, uncertain if she should be entering a space so resolutely high-end. But there was a determined spark in her heart, something that told her to face the day no matter the intimidation. With a firm push, she entered the lobby, feeling a rush of climate-controlled air against her cheeks. That first moment crossing the threshold sealed her fate. Behind the reception desk stood a young woman, coiffed hair, immaculate makeup, wearing a name tag and an expression that withered at the sight of Emily's scuffed shoes. Emily approached, explained she had an interview, and the woman's lips curved in mild distaste as she pointed to a seating area. The hush that followed felt loaded with tension, as if the entire building exhaled in judgment. Emily found a corner chair near a potted plant and settled there, ignoring the curious stares of the other candidates. She recognized their polished attire, crisp suits, leather portfolios gleaming. Hers, by contrast, was a battered bag she'd used for years, the canvas frayed at the edges. She reminded herself she had chosen not to indulge in the wealth she came from her family background that might have afforded her a different life. She hadn't told them about her father's estate or her mother's lineage, preferring to forge her own path. And here she was at this interview, anticipating a simple administrative job in a place that prized status above all else. She glanced around, taking in the subtle opulence, marble floors that glistened as staff walked by, the hushed hum of suits brushing fine fabric, faint scents of cologne and perfume mingling in the air. A large abstract painting hung across one wall, its colors bold and aggressive as if proclaiming the firm's ambition. She thought about how real estate was, an industry where illusions often triumphed, but she still believed it could be something more, something about connecting people to spaces that suited their genuine needs. She wanted to see if Cunningham Langston had any sincerity left in it, or if it was purely a vanity mill. That curiosity had compelled her to apply, even though the position was small. As she watched the other candidates sign in, she heard them toss around references to their Ivy League degrees or their prestigious internships. She remained silent, her own background unspoken, her resume minimal by design. Her father had once told her that the measure of her soul wasn't in the name of her university or her net worth, but in how she treated others. She repeated that silently in her mind, letting it steady her. A tall man with salt and pepper hair emerged from an interior door, scanning a list before calling out a name. One candidate rose, smoothing her blazer, and walked confidently after him. Emily took a slow breath, bracing herself. She knew her turn would come soon. Even so, she felt no urge to adjust her wrinkled shirt or try to perfect an image she didn't believe in. A slender woman in a sky blue suit sat 2 chairs away, tapping her pointed heels impatiently. She snuck glances at Emily's outfit, apparently appalled by the difference. Emily pretended not to notice. Instead, she gazed at her own reflection in the polished floor, recalling how she used to rummage secondhand shops with her mother for clothes that still had life. She refused to be ashamed of that. She understood she was drifting into an environment where such a background might seem offensive, but her father's voice in her head insisted, "Stay true." When the receptionist finally murmured, "Ms. Brown, they're ready for you," Emily rose, hitching her bag onto her shoulder. The woman's smirk remained as she handed over an elevator pass. "You'll need that for the 35th floor," she said, eyes flicking over Emily's wrinkled blouse one last time. Emily nodded in thanks, stepping into the elevator alone. She pressed the button, feeling the hush of rising. She took a moment to center her breathing, recalling that, as a girl, she'd always dreaded moments like these, exposure to a crowd that might judge her. Yet she also remembered how she'd chosen to leave behind her family's wealth, longing for a simpler life. She had no regrets about that choice. It taught her humility, empathy for those who struggled. She just hadn't anticipated how harsh a place like Cunningham Langston might be. The elevator opened onto a sleek corridor. Frosted glass doors lined the walls, each labeled with departmental titles in stylish fonts. She followed the sign for the interview suite, passing by staff in designer outfits clicking down the hall in expensive shoes. Their sidelong glances told her everything they saw her as an anomaly. She stepped into a small waiting area where a new receptionist with perfect eyeliner and a phone pressed to her ear beckoned her to wait. Another few minutes slipped by, tension coiling. Finally, the door to the conference room opened, releasing a man who walked out with a triumphant grin. He shot Emily a look of pity as if sure she wouldn't measure up. Then Ms. Carter, the HR director Emily had read about in the job listing, stuck her head out. She was tall hair and a tight chignon, wearing a crisp blouse that likely cost more than Emily's month's rent. "You're Ms. Brown? Come in," Ms. Carter said, voice clipped. Emily followed, heart pounding, but her expression calm, stepping into a large glass-walled room that overlooked part of the city skyline. The windows revealed high-rises glinting in the mid-morning sun. She saw her reflection again, unassuming, overshadowed by the brilliance of wealth behind her. Mr. Dalton, tanned and smug, sat at the head of a long table, fidgeting with monogrammed cufflinks. Ms. Carter took a seat beside him, crossing her legs elegantly. Another man, younger, typed notes on a tablet, barely glancing up. Emily sank into the chair at the table's opposite end, resting her bag on the floor. They asked for her resume, though she'd emailed it. She complied, sliding a simple folder. Ms. Carter opened it, scanning with bored eyes. Mr. Dalton sighed as if impatient. So he began, "Ms. Brown, you're here for an administrative role. But, looking at your background," he paused to flick the pages, "I see no high-profile corporate experience, no advanced degrees from schools we typically see, and you're older than some applicants we get for entry-level positions. Why the pivot to real estate?" Emily drew a breath. She explained she'd done small stints in property management, smaller broker offices, and non-profits, had a passion for connecting people with homes, believed in the potential for ethical real estate. Her words sounded modest. She withheld mention of the schools she actually attended, how she'd studied architecture and urban planning under a different name. She had chosen not to display her upper-class background on the resume. She wanted them to judge her for who she was, not for the privileges she'd once had. Ms. Carter frowned, tapping her pen on the polished tabletop. "Nonprofits volunteer work mission stints. Are you sure you can handle the demands of our clientele? We cater to an upscale market, international investors, celebrities. They expect staff with a certain polish." She eyed Emily's wrinkled blouse as though it confirmed her suspicion that Emily lacked refinement. Emily's voice stayed calm. "I believe courtesy and professionalism can transcend clothing. I'm fully prepared to adapt to your client's needs." Ms. Carter shared a derisive glance with Mr. Dalton, who sighed. "This is Manhattan's prime real estate, Ms. Brown. People here judge you in the first 3 seconds. They see your outfit, your posture, your jewelry. We need someone who looks the part." "No offense, but you appear unprepared. Even your shoes." He trailed off, letting the insult stand. Emily didn't flinch, though the sting sharpened in her chest. She stated calmly, "If my skill, my dedication to the job, and my willingness to learn count for nothing, then this might not be the right place for me." She half expected them to dismiss her on the spot, but Ms. Carter smirked. "You're right, it might not be. But let's keep going. We have a few more questions." Emily nodded, steeling herself. The questions that followed were pointed, some half mocking her references, others doubting her ability to represent wealthy clients. They made jibes about her gaps in employment, asked if she took time off to find herself, or if she was traumatized by a failed relationship. She answered politely, never rising to anger. Inside, she felt her father's moral compass guiding her not to lash back. The younger man tapped away at his tablet, occasionally scoffing quietly at her answers. Ms. Carter leaned forward again. "Let's say a multi-million-dollar client arrives. They step out of a limo wearing the finest brand names. You greet them at the door with, 'That shirt, those shoes.' They might question our credibility." "So how would you handle that moment?" Emily pressed her lips together, controlling the quiver of frustration. "I'd greet them with genuine respect," she said. "I'd ensure they felt heard. Most people are drawn to sincerity, not just appearances." Mr. Dalton sighed dramatically, flipping through her resume. "All right, well, we'll let you know. We have more candidates, ones who might align better with our corporate brand." The subtext was clear: leave. Emily Rose thanked them, ignoring the swirling mix of shame and relief. She stepped out, feeling the eyes of staff on her as she walked down the corridor. She managed to keep her posture straight until she reached the elevator, letting out a ragged breath as she descended. She had tried. That was all she could do. She spent the next few days returning to her routine scanning job boards, cooking simple meals, and volunteering at a local shelter. She tried to forget the stares, the quiet cruelty. But a call from an unknown number came a week later, summoning her to return for a final conversation. She found it odd that they wanted to see her again. She assumed they'd rejected her. Nonetheless, she went driven by curiosity. Once again, she stepped into the building's shimmering lobby. This time, the receptionist's eyes widened in faint surprise. "They told me to let you up to the top floor," the woman said with a forced politeness, handing Emily a new security pass. Emily thanked her, stepping into a different elevator. The top floor was rumored to be the personal domain of Margaret Langston, a woman seldom seen. She rode up, heart-pounding, uneasy. The doors opened onto a quieter hallway lined with understated art dimmer lighting that exuded calm confidence. A personal assistant, polished but not sneering, guided her to a door with no nameplate, opening it to reveal a modest office with a panoramic city view. A woman in her 50s, hair streaked with silver, wearing a simple blazer and dark jeans, stood behind a desk. Her posture radiated authority without pretension. "Emily Brown," she said, voice steady. "I'm Margaret Langston. I've been wanting to meet you." Emily's chest squeezed. So this was the founder, the rumored visionary who'd built Cunningham Langston from a tiny broker outfit to a real estate juggernaut. She nodded, stepping in carefully, feeling the hush of the environment. "Miss..." Langston offered a seat. Emily sank into it, noticing Ms. Langston's keen gaze linger on her wrinkled blouse, then flick away, as if unimpressed by appearances. "I read about your interview with Mr. Dalton and Ms. Carter," Ms. Langston said, "and how they treated you. I have a certain interest in how new candidates are welcomed, or unwelcome as the case may be." Emily swallowed, remembering every humiliating question. She said nothing, letting Ms. Langston continue. "They tested your background, your composure. They mocked your clothes, your gaps in employment, and you never once lost your calm or offered them a story about your personal background which might have changed their tune correct." Emily frowned slightly, unsure how Ms. Langston knew. Ms. Langston offered a small smile. "We do thorough research, Ms. Brown. Let's just say I know your father's estate, your mother's lineage. You've deliberately concealed it, I see." Emily's cheeks warmed. She realized Ms. Langston must have had her ways to dig deeper. I didn't want to rely on them," Emily admitted quietly. "I wanted to be judged for me." Ms. Langston nodded. "Yes, that's precisely why we need you in a position of leadership here." Emily felt her heart pound like a drum. "Leadership," she repeated. Ms. Langston chuckled. "I own Cunningham Langston entirely, Ms. Brown. I've grown disappointed in how the staff have become vain gatekeepers, forgetting that at our core we help people find homes. I wanted to see if there was anyone left who valued genuine courtesy over posturing. You, Ms. Brown, passing that humiliating interview with grace proved you have a moral compass aligned with my founding values." Emily blinked, the logic crashing over her. She recalled her father's lessons about not flaunting wealth or status. She realized Ms. Langston had intentionally orchestrated a scenario to reveal the staff's arrogance. Ms. Langston continued, "I plan to step back soon. I want the new owner, my successor, to bring humility back into real estate. That will be you if you accept. You'll be the controlling stake, the figure who leads us forward. Mr. Dalton, Ms. Carter, and the rest will answer to you." The swirl of disbelief nearly unmoored Emily. She stammered, I don't have corporate management experience to run a giant firm." Ms. Langston's eyes gleamed with confidence. "You'll learn. I'll mentor you. Your resume, stripped of your background, showed me you prefer to stand on your own feet, not nepotism. That is exactly the spirit I want here. So say yes, and we begin the transition. Or say no, and I'll find someone else. But I believe you'll say yes." The hush that followed was electric. Emily realized that with a single word she could upend the entire power structure that once ridiculed her. But she recalled why she'd come to real estate in the first place, a desire to reconnect people with the idea of home as a comfort, not a commodity. She whispered a single yes, her voice trembling. Ms. Langston exhaled in relief, stepping around the desk to shake Emily's hand firmly. Then welcome to your new reality. That day, everything changed. The next few weeks were a blur of documents, discreet board meetings, and strategic planning with Ms. Langston. They kept the process under wraps, letting the staff continue unawares. Meanwhile, Emily studied the firm's portfolio in detail, from high-end penthouses to commercial developments. She discovered corners of the business that championed affordable housing or philanthropic projects. Initiatives Ms. Langston had quietly funded, overshadowed by the firm's more glamorous deals. She found her convictions aligning with those modest philanthropic wings. She prepared for the moment she'd be unveiled as the new majority owner, ready to instill a spirit of empathy in a place once defined by elitism. She often recalled that humiliating interview, how Ms. Carter asked if she was refined enough. Now, ironically, Ms. Carter would be reporting to her. Emily felt no thirst for revenge. She simply wanted fairness. She remembered her father's steady voice: power is best used to protect, never to humiliate. When the day of the official announcement arrived, Ms. Langston summoned the executive staff to a grand boardroom. The room was bright with morning sun, the glass windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline. Mr. Dalton waited with smug expectancy. Ms. Carter fidgeted with her phone. The rest of the board murmured about expansions in Europe. Ms. Langston entered Emily at her side, hearts pounding. Ms. Langston addressed the group calmly. I have called you here to inform you of my retirement. I've enjoyed building this firm from nothing, but it's time for me to hand control to my successor. That successor is Ms. Emily Brown. Gasps rippled around the table, eyes whipping toward Emily, who stood in the same wrinkled blouse she'd worn at the interview, as if to underscore the irony. Ms. Langston continued, she will assume majority ownership and the role of CEO once the legalities finalize. I expect full cooperation from everyone. The hush was deep, broken only by Mr. Vall. Dalton's stuttering attempt to protest. Ms. Carter's face drained of color. They both recalled their mocking words, realizing they had scorned the future boss. Ms. Carter whispered something about, but she wore, we had no idea. Ms. Langston silenced her with a glance. That's precisely the problem, Ms. Carter. You judged by appearance, not substance. Emily stepped forward, inhaling slowly. She felt her legs tremble but forced calm into her voice. I'm not here to enact vengeance, she said. However, I do plan significant changes. This firm must become a place where skill and integrity matter more than brand labels. We will reevaluate the staff structure. Those who have shown repeated contempt for others may find they don't belong here. Mr. Dalton's jaw tightened. Ms. Carter's posture sagged. Others in the room wore expressions ranging from shock to excitement. Ms. Langston placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, a show of support. That concluded the meeting, leaving the room in stunned disarray. In the following days, Mr. Dalton quietly resigned. Ms. Carter attempted a desperate apology, claiming ignorance of Emily's background, but Emily's condition for her to remain was that she accept a demotion and retraining on ethics. Ms. Carter, not wanting to lose her livelihood, complied with shame. With the top seats reshuffled, Emily worked tirelessly to rebuild the internal culture. She introduced new guidelines forbidding discrimination based on attire, background, or superficial impressions. She personally oversaw the creation of a staff mentorship program where employees were encouraged to share knowledge, not flaunt credentials. The building's vibe gradually softened. Receptionists learned to greet each visitor kindly, no longer smirking at mismatched outfits. Ms. Carter, now in a supportive role, found herself training under a new HR manager who championed empathy and fairness. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Old habits died hard. But the shift in leadership approach was undeniable. Meanwhile, the real estate deals continued, many large-scale. Emily attended meetings with bankers, wealthy clients, and city officials wearing modest outfits that refused to bow to the high-fashion norms. She carried a battered leather folder for her notes, a quiet reminder of her history. Some clients gawked at her unorthodox style, but they soon learned her intelligence and resolve were unassailable. She brokered deals that balanced profit with social responsibility, channeling Ms. Langston's philanthropic spirit. Gradually, the firm's reputation soared beyond pure luxury to champion sustainable, community-friendly projects. Journalists took notice, lauding the new face of Cunningham Langston, a woman who overcame scorn and now redefines success. In private, Emily found time to reflect on the arc of her journey. She never flaunted her father's estate or her mother's lineage, even though Ms. Langston had discovered it. She felt no need to publicly claim that heritage. She had proven her worth on her own terms. One evening, while tidying her new CEO office, she discovered an old photograph tucked behind a filing cabinet, an image of Ms. Langston in her youth wearing cheap clothes, standing beside a rundown property. It reminded Emily how wealth can come from humble beginnings. She pinned that photo on a corkboard by her desk, a daily reminder that real value resides in determination, not brand labels. The staff occasionally noticed the picture and asked about it. Emily only smiled, saying it symbolized the firm's true roots. She made time to help the lower-level staff learning their stories and championing their promotions if they had talent and passion. She saw echoes of herself in them, overlooked, ridiculed for not fitting a certain mold. Under her leadership, Mapleheart, once a place of cruelty for job candidates, transformed into a role model for inclusive hiring. Eventually, she changed the entire dress code policy, removing the requirement for high-end suits, focusing on competence. Some longtime employees balked, but the new wave of hires embraced the refreshing stance. The company's profits soared ironically as grateful employees poured their hearts into the work. They recognized the intangible bond that forms when a workplace respects everyone. Throughout the year, Ms. Langston watched from a supportive distance, content that she'd chosen correctly. She officially stepped aside, leaving Emily as the uncontested head of the firm. The day Ms. Langston finally retired, the staff organized a modest farewell in the lobby, and she used her farewell speech to praise Emily's humility and brilliance. In that moment, the memory of the humiliating interview felt almost mythical, like a parable about prejudice, overshadowed by the truth that one quiet candidate changed an entire empire. Emily and Ms. Langston embraced, tears glistening. Then Ms. Langston walked away with a calm smile, leaving Emily to captain the ship. After that, Emily initiated expansions into affordable housing projects in neglected neighborhoods, forging alliances with local nonprofits. She directed part of the firm's profits into community revitalization, believing that real estate's real purpose was to serve, not merely exploit. She kept her private life modest, living in a simple apartment, though she could afford more. She refused chauffeur-driven cars, preferring to ride the subway or walk to the office. Reporters occasionally tried to spin her as the anti-luxury CEO, but she never engaged the label wars. Instead, she stayed consistent, respectful, measured, and quietly revolutionary in how she redefined success. She also took time to personally meet job candidates from varied backgrounds, ensuring no one endured the cruelty she once faced. Seeing people's relief that their clothing or background wouldn't disqualify them gave her an indescribable satisfaction. Some staff from the old regime, like Ms. Carter, still whispered about how strange it was that Emily didn't flaunt her wealth or lineage. But they couldn't deny the results. The employees found a new sense of belonging. Clients admired her sincerity. The board, initially wary, conceded that profits soared more than ever, boosted by public goodwill and stable expansions. The entire tower that once symbolized snobbery became a beacon of a modern, empathetic approach to real estate. To honor that shift, Emily had a small plaque placed in the interview room where she'd first been mocked, inscribed with the words, "Value is found in truth, not trappings." She didn't label it with her name, but employees who noticed it understood its significance. The conversation around the water cooler changed from petty gossip about designer suits to excited talk of new community projects, new ways the firm could do business with heart. When asked about her father's estate or her mother's background, Emily only ever said, "They taught me love is unconditional, that I don't need to prove myself to those who can't see beyond clothes." That statement alone became part of the internal ethos among employees, many of whom started adopting a more grounded lifestyle, or at least a more empathetic approach. The building's lobbies, once echoing with stiletto heels and cold remarks, now occasionally saw employees dressing comfortably, not under threat of losing credibility. The shift was slow and not universal. There would always be holdouts clinging to old, elitist ways, but the tide had irrevocably turned. Years from that humiliating day, the story of Emily's interview became a piece of company lore, recounted with awe by new hires who marveled at how a woman wearing scuffed shoes and a wrinkled blouse ascended to ownership. Some retold it as a cautionary tale about prejudging applicants. Others saw it as a testament to Ms. Langston's cunning test of character. Emily herself rarely discussed it, except to remind staff that each person who enters the firm's doors deserves genuine respect. She found quiet satisfaction in seeing new employees from humble backgrounds excel under her watch, freed from the shackles of superficial expectations. She felt that every small victory, like an intern from a low-income family winning a scholarship for advanced training, honored her father's memory. She still wore the same style of clothes, ignoring suggestions that she dressed the part. That was part of her message: real competence shouldn't hide behind brand logos. Late one night, after finishing a round of reviewing philanthropic proposals, Emily took the elevator down to the lobby. She passed the spot where she'd once sat, a nobody among suited elites. The memory flashed the receptionist's smirk, the hushed laughter. Now, a different receptionist manned the desk, a young man who greeted every visitor with a warm smile, no matter their attire. Emily paused, letting the memory linger. She breathed in the building's subtle hush, grateful for how far they'd come. She stepped outside into the Manhattan darkness, the air cool on her cheeks. The city lights glowed, a mosaic of possibility. She thought about returning home to a quiet meal or taking a walk along the block. She felt the city's pulse in her bones. Then she walked down the sidewalk, blending with the night, secure in the knowledge that dignity, once tested, had become her armor. She had turned shame into a platform for kindness, rewrote everything from within, and that was enough. If this story reminded you of someone you once were, or someone you once ignored, sit with it a moment. Dignity doesn't shout, it waits. If you felt something like it, share it with someone who needs to know they were always more than what they wore.